I think about going into places feeling quite nervous. I think about the first time I was going to go and work with the Stormers. I was young. I was 26, and I had to go and drive to Belleville in my little Opel Corsa and sit in front of Habana, Jean de Villiers, Jacques Fourie, Dwayne Vermeulen, these Skalkberger, and basically tell them what I do and how I'm going to help them. And Rasmus was a sort of director of rugby at the time, so he got me there. He gave me the opportunity to work there, which was great, and I'm always grateful to him for that. But yeah, I remember that being pretty pretty intimidating. It was a funny story. I remember when I had to do my first workshop with the Stormers, and the players were sort of streaming into the team area, and I was standing at the back. And I remember Jean de Villiers. You can edit this out, but if you want. But I remember Jean de Villiers walking up to me, going, whispering in my ear. He went, "This is your World Cup final, buddy. Don't fuck it up." And I think people in sport, and especially in cricket, it's a very exposing industry. It's a very exposing life. And therefore, I think cricketers put up boundaries around themselves. And I understand why. Because if you think about your average franchise player, he's being exposed to what, 60, 70, 80 management members in a year if he plays for 5 or 6 teams. Plus, think about the amount of teammates. Like, you can't just open up all the time.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Stumped. With me, as always, CS Chiwanza, and joining me today is a performance coach, Tom Dawson-Squibb. Tom, welcome and thank you for joining me.
Thanks. Yes. Thanks for having me.
Brilliant. I want to start. When I asked for this interview, I wanted to start specifically with the Proteas and you. You went with them to the World Cup. You guys got to the final. How did that journey begin?
Um, yeah, so it began actually, funnily enough, I was reading Cricket Info um, when they appointed Rob and Shooks, and I read that they were looking for a performance coach. So I thought, well, I'd actually love to do that role. So I reached out to, I reached out to Rob because I'd met him once before. And we had a few back and forths. I had a conversation with Enoch. I had a conversation with Shooks. And then they decided to bring me on board. So I was with them only with the white ball team. I ended up not working with Shooks's test team, with the white ball team from essentially July 2023 to the end of 2024. So 18 months across the 50 over World Cup and the T20 World Cup as well, and then obviously all the other series.
And I suppose for those who don't know or have heard the term but don't really have a good grasp on what it means, what is a performance coach?
Yeah, I think it's differing in different environments, but in essence, you're not there around cricket strategy or cricket technique. It's around the connections between people in the team dynamic space. It's around helping leadership. It's around helping coaches be the best version of themselves. It's around helping players be the best version of themselves, specifically around their mentality, their habits, their thinking patterns. And I think that's the role of the performance coach. It often differs based on what the head coach requires or what the team requires. So you may play a different role in one team to another, but in essence, the role is non-technical or tactical, but behavioral and mental, I suppose, and acting as a support mechanism for both coaches and players.
It's sort of strange for people who know you from your beginnings because you were, before you became a well-rounded performance coach, you were a rugby coach. How did you get into rugby? Did you have playing background? What led you into coaching in rugby? Because I believe you started in something like 2010.
Yeah, well, I actually started probably before that, I think. My story in coaching probably began at 15. I was an enthusiastic, but fairly medium pace away swing bowler. And I got a back injury. So I was out of cricket for over a year. And in that time, so I was in what we then term standard 8, now grade 10. I started coaching cricket. And then, in fact, I did my umpires qualifications as well. So I would umpire on a Saturday for a team younger than me and do a little bit of coaching. And then actually into university, to make extra money, I started coaching. So I coached in an academy here in Cape Town. I ended up coaching a school called Redham's first team as a coach of cricket. And then when I started doing the performance coach stuff in 2009, that's when I started working with different teams, both in rugby and cricket and other sports for that matter. I think in total I worked with like 18 different sports. But I started doing that. And then, so I think from 2010, when I started really professionally doing this as a full-time thing, I started working with cricket and with rugby teams. I just happened to have some high-profile rugby teams, from 2011, I worked with the Stormers and then thereon. But then in 2017 or 18, I think it might have been 17, I did a little bit of work in the Mzansi Super League with the Durban Heat. And a lot of work with Gary Kirsten's Cricket Academy, as well as a lot of work with Stellenbosch University and with some schools in their cricket space. So, yeah, I think it's probably a bit of a myth that I was like the rugby guy, because actually cricket is where I've done a lot of work and enjoyed it and played a bit as well, but at a very poor level. And then, yeah, then I did a lot of stuff in rugby, but did a little bit in the IPL with Gary as well. Gary and I have a good relationship, and with the Welsh Fire in the 100. And then with the Dutch, so did quite a bit of work with the Dutch cricket side. In fact, in the lead up to them qualifying for the T20 World Cup, and then then the Proteas came along. In between all of that, I worked with the Stormers, the Sharks, the Melbourne Rebels, but then also coached a rugby team as the head coach at UCT, University of Cape Town. So yeah, there's been a lot of different angles that I've taken. I suppose ultimately it's always around connecting people for performance. I think that's as simplistically as I can put it. I think we are who we are because of others. And if we can get people to connect really well with others, with their leadership, with themselves and their own processes, I think we can get the best out of people, So yeah, that's a little bit about my journey.
Before we get into the more serious things, but what is the most memorable stuff that happened to you as a young coach? You were coaching at 15, at 16, at 17. Now, surely there had to be interesting moments where people look at you and they're like, this is a youngster. What can he tell us? How can he guide us to be better? Some of those interesting moments.
Yeah, I feel like you still get that to these like now, to this day, because ultimately when you haven't played the game at a high level, there's always going to be that element of suspicion. But there was a famous soccer coach who coached Inter Milan called Arrigo Sacchi, and he said you don't have to have been a horse to be a jockey. So my view is that I obviously need to understand the sport that I'm working in at an elite level, which I do, I think, but I don't need to be an expert in cricket or rugby. I don't believe. In fact, I think sometimes it helps that you're not, because you're able to ask the questions that people aren't asking or bring a different point of view, which I think can shake up the more established thinking, which can sometimes be quite useful. So sure, in terms of sort of memorable moments, I think I've always had memorable moments. I think, I think about going into places feeling quite nervous. I think about the first time I was going to go and work with the Stormers. I was young, I was 26, and I had to go and drive to Belleville in my little Opel Corsa and sit in front of Habana, Jean de Villiers, Jacques Fourie, Dwayne Vermeulen, these Skalkberger, and basically tell them what I do and how I'm going to help them. and Rasmus was the director of rugby at the time, so he got me there. He gave me the opportunity to work there, which was great, and I'm always grateful to him for that. But yeah, I remember that being pretty intimidating. It was a funny story. I remember when I had to do my first workshop with the Stormers, and the players were sort of streaming into the team area, and I was standing at the back. And I remember Jean de Villiers. You can edit this out, but if you want. But I remember Jean de Villiers walking up to me, going, whispering in my ear, he went, "This is your World Cup final, buddy. Don't fuck it up." And I remember that being quite funny, you know. But you have those moments all the time. I think you have moments where people, you know, are suspicious or what have you. But then you have those beautiful moments, you know, where teams do well, or you get a message. I had a message yesterday from a guy that I've coached, telling me that he's just graduated now and he's in his first year of what he's doing. I don't want to say too much, give it away, but you know, just really appreciating the lessons that he felt like he learned from me in his life so far, and how he's putting them to use. Like that for me is as powerful as anything, you know. Or sitting with a cricketer, you know, who does really well in yesterday's auction, and feeling really proud of what he's done and the work that we've done and the relationship we've built over time. So, I mean, I'm not taking credit for what he's done at all, please. But more just, you know, seeing people that you've worked with flourish is just the best, man.
How do you gain the trust of people who feel, because you walk into a room where there's people who feel that they have accomplished way more than you, they have more knowledge in a certain genre of sport than you. How do you gain their trust so that they can listen to you? I think that is probably one of the most difficult things a person who has to come in and help people perform can do.
Yeah, it's difficult, man. Like, I'll be honest, it's really difficult, and I think it's different at different levels. So, and in different cultures. So I've found going into some environments, people are unbelievably receptive, and then in some environments, people are not receptive at all. So let me answer your question more directly. The first thing is I'm quite a trusting person. So I trust people before I don't trust them, which can get you into trouble. And I believe, therefore, that people are going to trust me. So that is my worldview, which is got me not into trouble per se, but you know, it's been difficult because of that. So I think trusting people first helps them trust you. I think just being yourself helps them trust you. I think showing real curiosity helps them trust you. You know, I often say, like, you know, my time with the Proteas, I think was amazing, and I loved it, and very, very difficult and challenging. And I think I'm quite open about it. Like, if I were to have it again, I would have tried to be quiet for longer and just be more curious and try and find out a little bit more around where they were at. But actually, my enthusiasm and my need to feel like I'm making a difference probably made me want to add value too quickly. And if I had that again, that's why I always say, like, it takes real confidence to be curious. It takes real security to be curious, because you don't know where it's going to go, and you might have to sit for months on end and do very little, but be confident with that and comfortable with that. So I think, like, for me, but then over time, I think people realize who you are and what you are and kind of a human you are. And I think people then invariably trust you. I think you also have to be mindful of, like, trust is on a continuum, right? So, you know, you might trust your wife implicitly or your family implicitly, but I'm not necessarily going to trust someone I work with to that same extent. So we mustn't tar everyone with the same brush. Like, we need to have, as someone once said to me, like, can we trust each other enough to put our distrust on the table? So we don't have to trust each other implicitly with our deepest, darkest secrets. And I think people in sport, and especially in cricket, it's a very exposing industry. It's a very exposing life. And therefore, I think cricketers put up boundaries around themselves. And I understand why. Because if you think about your average franchise player, he's being exposed to, what, 60, 70, 80 management members in a year if he plays for 5 or 6 teams. Plus, think about the amount of teammates. Like, you can't just open up all the time. You've got to be a little bit guarded. So I think it makes someone like myself's work even harder, but it also makes me, I'm empathetic with that and I understand. So I don't expect people just to open up straight away. And that you slowly, incrementally increase trust as you would incrementally increase your body fitness or your ability to hit a cover drive.
And when you're working with a team like the Proteas, do you conduct a lot of group meetings, or do you prefer a more targeted approach where people will come to you and you sort of open your door, you open it to everyone, you invite everyone in, and whoever comes through can sort of tap into what you can contribute?
Look, I believe that there's massive power in collective conversation. I also know that the word meeting in cricket parlance is like a swear word at the moment. And I know that from a few environments. The cricketers generally don't like meetings. They've got a bad rap about them. I mean, Manners wrote about it the other day, and I actually replied to him about it because it's right. I think that in some ways is a bit limited because I think there's a real collective intelligence that sits in cricket teams that we can learn from each other, and we can create safety with each other through some really well-guided conversations. The problem is, I think maybe a lot of those meetings that I had are not done particularly well, or they're done as a matter of routine without real intention. So I think there is huge value to be had in collective conversation if done well. I did a few initially with the Proteas, but then majority not, because they weren't, the guys don't like meetings that much, nor did they want me to be running them. So the large part of the conversations were done in maybe with a leadership group or one-on-one or with coaching staff.
I had to revisit your book, which I'm always grateful to have.
Thanks, man.
Humanball. And when I revisited it, I ran into a phrase that I think has been a constant so far in this conversation: performance connections. And because I'm a storyteller, I love the analogy that you gave of Callis and Boucher, that between overs, they did not discuss the game as it were. Yes, they would touch on it here and there, but their conversations were mainly about their life outside the game. Can you please tell me how important that is, that you're able to have these connections where you can discuss beyond the sport?
Yeah, man. So let's go back to sort of first principles on that. Like, human beings are impacted by other human beings. So whilst cricket is in many ways a very individual sport, like you got to go and score runs or ball, it also isn't, because for starters, it's difficult for me to bowl and get great figures unless the field is field for me. I can't necessarily get runs unless people are willing to run between the wickets. Now you go into the nuances of cricket. There's conditions, there's all sorts of things that come into it. So we have to realize that we are affected by people around us, by the situation, by the conditions. Are we or do we have to bat at 6 and over? Do we have to chase at 12 and over? Like, there's a lot of things that impact us, and our connection between a circumstance or people and ourselves impacts performance. So I also believe that we talked about trust and we talk about connection. And when you talk about connection and trust, sometimes people see it as a bit fluffy. And like I'm in a team now for 5 weeks. Like, am I really going to trust this person or build this great team connection or great bond? Maybe, but probably not. But I'm still going to bat with him or bowl with him or be in a team with him. So we have to find a way to connect, but for performance. If we happen to become friends, great. But we're in an environment where the reason we are put together is to win games of cricket. So that must be the first thing, is how do we connect for performance? So I think at the crux of it is having a curiosity for me to understand, like, right, what is it that you need, CS, in order for you to run a great podcast or for you to score runs? What might you need from me? What might I need from you? So just at the basics of awareness, and then actually giving each other what we've agreed. So you need this, I need this. Now we give each other what we do. So we build this rapport with each other, and we enable each other to perform. So some batsman might actually want his batting partner to say nothing to him about the game. Some batsmen I know love the fist pump. They love energy. They like to feed off the energy of their batting partner. That's a performance connection taking place. So if you've got a bowler, and I talk about it in the book, you've got a bowler playing in a franchise league, he gets hit for 6 and 6. He looks around, not one member of his teammates are looking at him. Do you think that bowler is going to be a better space than if one or two of his teammates come up to him, slow him down, tap him on the back, say, no worries about this. Have you thought about this option? Surely both ways are connecting. One's just connecting for performance, the one's not connecting for performance at all. And I think it's important, I've had conversation with a well-renowned bowling coach, and, he's like, sometimes one of the worst things you can do is a bowler's bowling really well. Someone runs up to him, gives him some thoughts in his ear, and it takes him off kilter. It takes him off what he's meant to be doing. And I'm like, absolutely. But we're always connecting. That's just not a very good performance. That's not a performance connection. That's a low performance connection. But we need to understand that we are impacted by each other all the time. And I promise you, it'll be, as much as guys want to protest that it's individual and just leave me to be, then why do those same players always say, I did so well because the environment was great? Well, if the environment was great, that means you're impacted by other things, which means connections are important, because the environment is the remit of everyone. So, yeah, that's why I believe so strongly in understanding that human beings, especially men, when things are going difficult for us, what do? We retract, we withdraw, we try and become stoic and do things on our own. But I always say the antidote to pressure is connection. So till the day I die, I will believe that if you want to get the Proteas to win World Cups, it's going to come down to the quality of connections that take place. That doesn't mean they all have to be friends and eat dinner together or anything like that. But the quality of their connections to be able to handle those big pressure situations is going to be the most important thing. And that's why I'd say now, like, quite simply, what do? I connect people for performance. That is what I want to do, because I think that's what's most required. I think that's the problem we've got to solve across many sports and in business, for that matter.
A couple of years ago, I had a chat with Neil McKenzie. He's trying to do something on his journey as a player. And one of the things he told me was that he was that one guy who always wanted to hang around the dressing room. Like after a match, he wanted people to hang around, people to just sort of connect, have a conversation. But that era that Mackenzie grew up in is sort of gone. Like, guys don't really spend a lot of time together if they're on a tour, because everyone has a cell phone to get to. They have a video game to get to. We now have these little bubbles that we can now just retreat into after a match. Does that help, or does that take away from team performances?
Oh, it's hard to infer causality, but I think I think spending time in a change room afterwards is it's sacred. It's a great time, and it's actually quite nice. It almost happens organically if you think about the Proteas, for example. Like, there'll be presentations and what have you. So you're generally not leaving the change room. You'll be there for at least an hour after the game before you get on the bus, and I think that's great time. For guys to chat, have a laugh, reflect on the game, have a beer. I think that's great time, and it's valuable. I think it's an absolute tragedy. Someone was talking to me the other day about playing club cricket, and that they actually they find it quite hard to get guys to stay after a day of cricket. And I'm like, you got to get guys to stay. Maybe not every Saturday, and then maybe don't have to have 15 beers, but just to stay around and converse and have a laugh and reflect on the game and get boosted by your teammates. And wow, CS, like that was amazing. I loved what you did there. Like those little things I think they do deepen the connections in some ways. And they might enable us to therefore have even more useful conversations about cricket because we've got to know each other a little bit more. So yeah, I'm a big supporter of that. And I think you've got to be quite clever if you're coaching a team. You know, maybe, for example, don't put the phone straight out after the game. Wait 20 minutes after the game before the phones come back and just have a time to spend together, you know. There might be little things that one can do to enable connections.
And you spoke of the work you've done with Gary, with his academy, with the Welsh Fire in the IPL. How did that relationship come to be? The beginnings.
Yeah, it's a good question. Tough one for me to really put my finger on it. I think what happened was a chap called Ryan Cook, who's the Dutch coach. He came down from Joburg to coach at Rondebosch, and I was doing a little bit of performance work with the Rondebosch team. So we then got to know each other, and I think then Ryan and I started to do some personal work together on his own coaching journey. And funnily enough, now all these years later, Ryan and I are friends, and I'm actually working with the Dutch going forward. But Ryan was working with Gary's academy, and Ryan then got me in to come and start doing some performance work with Gary's academy. And then I think Gary, you know, was part of some of those conversations and felt, I suppose, maybe this guy's got something to add. And then it sort of went on from there. I think Gary and I we've shared many laughs. Whenever we talk on the phone, we know we're going to have some hysterical laughter for a few minutes of that time. You know what, Gary's probably 56, 57, so he's a fair bit older than me. But we've got this like childlike enthusiasm for what we do, you know, and like talking about coaching and how you get the best out of this and what do we think here, and having in-depth conversations about sport and in amongst that having a laugh. And I think, like, you know, we connected really deeply in that Welsh Fire trip. I mean, we went to we lost 8 from 8. But, you know, Gary and I were the two South Africans. Well, Dave Miller was there as well. But Gary and I were, I don't know, if we were there for 30 nights, we probably had dinner together for 20 of them, you know, just the two of us. And we got to know each other. And, you know, it's difficult when you're losing and sort of counseling each other and helping each other and yeah, deepened our connection. So yeah, I think it's just come about from shared interest. And yeah, we chat a lot. Gary and I chat a lot.
And one of the most difficult things as a performance coach is to have a situation you just mentioned. You lose 8 from 8. And yet you have to keep the guys motivated. How do you do that? You know, because some guys will beat on themselves because they feel that they are not doing enough. And yet sometimes it's just because the other side just has better players at the moment who are in better form than you are. How do you get guys to keep going even when it seems as if nothing is happening for them?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, you know, you look at the nature of cricket now with all these leagues, and things can turn so quickly, you know. So quickly. You know, I was with the Sharjah Warriors now last year in the T20, and we made the team had come last and last the 2 prior years. We ended up making the playoff. We were 1 game away from making the final, you know, and who knows what would have happened there. So, like, it can turn so quickly. And I remember when I was at the Welsh Fire, we lost 2 games in a row and people are starting to get down. And, you know, I said, like, guys, 2 games is not a trend. You know, like, you got to be careful of inferring these trends, you know, because you could play the next game, someone gets 80 or 40 balls, you win the game. Now everything's fine, you know. So one got to be careful of how quickly we spiral. But then we lost game 3 and 4, and then someone said to me, "Is it a trend now?" I was like, "Yeah, it might be a trend now." But I think in terms of motivation, it's an interesting one because different people are motivated by different things. And I often say, like, rugby in some ways is it's like an effort-centric game. It's like work rate and intensity and physicality and stuff. Whereas cricket is, you've got to show effort in the field, what have you. But it's like, especially T20, it's like a skill-centric game. It's like I've got that ability to bowl 20 or not if it's 100, 24 really good balls. I've got to have the ability to come in and score 30 or 12 balls to win a game. Statistically, if you have a great IPL as a batter, you're going to perform in 5-6 games. Do you know what I mean? And I'm saying like winning matches, maybe in 4 games. So that's how guys are thinking now. And I think it's not that they don't care, but that they have to be realistic about things. So in terms of motivating people and what have you, I think you've just got to realize, like, by nature, you're going to fail more than you're going to succeed. I remember reading this thing in a book saying, like, your average cartoonist will do something like 1 out of 10 cartoons that he draws or she draws will get published. So they've got a failure rate of 90%. Cricket, you've got a failure rate of probably north of 50%. You have to accept that and acknowledge that, even though it's not nice. So I think in terms of motivating it, a lot of it's around perspective. Why are you motivated? Were you motivated because you got to support your family, maybe, but you're also motivated because that's your profession. That's just how you identify yourself. You identify someone who works hard, So I think the idea of the rah-rah speech and playing for some bigger cause and what have you, not convinced that a lot of these players going around are playing for deeper causes, if I'm honest. If they're playing for the Barbados Royals or something like that, I think they will have other more personal meanings that they play for. And that actually, when you can create an environment where they feel comfortable, they feel safe, where they feel supported, that's as much of a motivator as anything. And that's what we try and work really hard to create in team spaces.
One of the things that I feel is quite important, I think it's also, again, I'll keep lifting this up, just in case someone is looking, because it's available in South Africa, everywhere. It's been available for months. But one of the things that you mentioned in Humanball is that it's a Feynman quote that you shared, that we have to move around with our questions, like 12 questions or something within our heads.
You know what I think, CS, is I think the best people are highly curious. They're always looking for ways to get better.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this like, I don't know if it's a paradox or what it is, but it's like, we've got to be curious to want to get better, but we've also got to be super clear on who we are and what we are. Does that make sense? So it's like,
yes,
a cricketer who's constantly like asking, like, what can I do? What can I do? Like, he's almost over searching. I'm not sure he's going to perform at the top. But a cricketer who's blocked off to any bits of inputs and insights and wanting to get better, I'm not sure he's going to perform at the top. So it's like, we've got certain questions that create a framework for us. So we're not just taking an input from everyone, but there might be certain questions that we're thinking, like, how can I become more of a 360 batter? Or what is the real key to my thought process in order for me to execute at 90% Yorkers? Do you know what I mean? And like, being deeply curious with oneself and knowing more about themselves. Lord Sebastian Coe said, he was an athlete, he organized the British Olympics. He said, a champion has an insatiable desire to know more about himself. And it's like, I think when we walk around with questions, we want to know more about ourselves. We want to know more about others, but not in a desperate way that we feel that we're starting from scratch every time. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I use a slightly different analogy of that. A player says to me, this is a rugby player, he's playing professional rugby, and he says to me, yes, Tom, I didn't do my preparation that well this week. There were things that got in the way and what have you. I'm worried about Saturday's game. So I said to him, yeah, but if we think about it, yes, you want to do your prep, but you've done thousands of weeks of preparation. You don't go back to zero every time. Do you know what I mean? You don't go back to the zero at the start of every week. You've got that preparation builds up. And it's the same with curiosity. We don't go back to zero. So we know certain things. Ryan Rickleton will know certain things about his game. And then he'll have one or two things that he also is curious about. How can I know a little bit more? And those are the questions I think that we carry with us is, like, what is it that I'm wanting to know a little bit more about? Where am I open to? What is important for me in order to become a world-class batter or world-class bowler all rounder? And I think that, that curiosity, but that almost frameworked curiosity rather than just wanting to know everything, I think is important. I remember hearing a story on Michael Jordan. And when he was a college basketballer, he would ask for feedback without fail after every practice. But Jordan was also super confident, but he was also super driven. So he wanted feedback because there might be something that he was going to learn. Steph Curry, the basketballer, says every match I play is an opportunity for me to learn something else. So there's a curiosity in two of the great basketballers of all time. But that doesn't mean that they're not confident. And I think that's what I would like to see in professional sportsmen, and especially cricketers, is there's a curiosity, but the right amount of curiosity. They're not asking all and sundry for advice, but they're also not blocking themselves off. And it's finding that balance of what's right for them.
Yes, and I love that because you summed up exactly what I wanted to ask, because I found the passage where you say, you quote, you have to keep a dozen of your favorite problems constantly present in your mind, although by and large, they will lay in a dormant state. Every time you hear or read a new trick or a new result, test it against each of your 12 problems and see where that helps. Every once in a while, there'll be a hit, and people will say, how did he do that? That is a genius. And I feel you broke it down.
No, cool. I'm glad.
And the title, Humanball.
Yeah.
Why?
Look, I mean, it's, obviously everything is ball. It started with Moneyball. The great Billy Bean, I think.
Yes,
In Coach Billy Bean, Moneyball, and what have you. And then it's now Baz Ball, and I see in the Springboks it's Tony Ball, and then it was some other ball in soccer. There's no Tom Ball. I'm not famous enough for that, or good enough for that, or I don't want there to ever be a Tom Ball. I don't think that's. I don't believe in that. But I think there is a clear set of ideas and principles for which I believe in, and obviously it's how do we maximize people through the way we connect? And I think that when we were discussing, myself and Nick, my co-author, it was actually his idea. He was like, well, we're human balling. We're trying to get the best out of humans. And we didn't necessarily have the highest resources or talent or anything like that. We had talent, but I'm not saying we had the best or the most money, but we had to maximize what we had by combining people and interacting in a way that made people feel safe, made people feel like they belonged, and ultimately made people driven to get better all the time. So we coined the phrase human ball. And I talk about human balling, so that's a relentless focus on maximizing people together. That's what we did try and do and talked about in the book, and certainly what I intend to keep trying doing, whether I'm coaching a team, consulting to a team, running a business, whatever it might be. I think Humanball will stay with me.
And where can one get the book? Where is it available?
Yeah, so obviously in South Africa, all exclusive books have got it. It's available on Takealot. It's available on Amazon. Print to buy. You can get it on your Kindle. There'd probably be some other, independent bookstores where it would be available. It's even available on our website, humanball.co.za. So it's pretty widely available if people are wanting to get it. So we've been super chuffed with the response so far. I mean, who knows what's a successful book or what's not a successful book. We wrote it because we were deeply enthusiastic about what it is, what the story was, and we felt like, so many stories are written about things that are a success. We didn't ever win, so it felt like we had to write the book. But there was enough success and enough stories to tell. And I think the thing that really inspired me to write it was, I always did a survey after every campaign with the players, and listening to the players talk about like what they gained and the memories they created and what have you, just made me think, hey, this is like too special to not document. So what probably started as a small little project for us just to document our journey has been something that, like, over 1,000 people have now read, and given some good feedback and thoughts on, which is amazing, and I feel very humbled by it. And it's been cool to keep sharing the journey, and kind of my hope is that it inspires other people to share their journey, and for us to learn from each other, because that's probably one of the principles of Humanball, is to be curious around how to get better all the time.
Oh, fantastic. And final question. We do not succeed as much as we fail. Without mentioning names or teams, was there a player whom you felt you struggled the most to connect with?
Oh yeah, there'd be a few. There'd be a few, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I suppose you can't have it all, eh? You can't. Sometimes you want to help, but someone doesn't want to be helped. Sometimes maybe someone saw something in you that either mistaken you or that was their perception. But yeah, definitely. Definitely had play. Sometimes it's not with animosity. It's just that they're not particularly interested, and that's also fine. Eh? Like, that's also fine. I've only had one or two bits of like real strong pushback in my career, which is unpleasant and not nice, but it is what it is. As you always say, you can't win them all. But I suppose you choose to look at the people that you have connected with, and then the ones that you haven't with or have pushed back. Like, what was it that I might have done that created that low, like poor connection? And if I can learn from that and do something differently, then I'll take that learning. Difficult to change people, easier to change the connection between people.
So instead of looking at it as animosity or that this person doesn't like me or whatever, maybe there is something, a tool that I could add to my toolbox that will help me to make better connections with other people who are probably in the same boat as this other person I felt to make a connection.
Yeah, man. And I think the biggest tool is patience. I think of a particular player at the Proteas. When I first joined, I don't think he had even 5 seconds for me. Towards the back end of me leaving, we got on really well. He actually messaged me once at 6 a.m. saying, "Please, are you available? I need to have a chat." Like, that was a massive shift in that person. And I think it was just because I didn't rush it. I didn't push the guy, and maybe he saw like, this guy's not such an idiot, and some people are getting value from him, so I will too. And still now to this day, like, a couple of the guys from the Proteas will message, "Hey, can I have a chat?" And that's cool. That's great. It's not about me, it's about them. And the fact, so obviously did some good stuff. JP and I worked together at the Proteas. He's now asked me to come and work with him at Sharjah Warriors. So yeah, I suppose it's to celebrate the connections that have worked, and those that haven't worked, to learn, like, maybe it's about patience. And then also, maybe like a batter, you have to accept you're not going to score runs every day. As a performance coach, you have to accept not everyone's going to buy into you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Tom, for joining me today. I hope we can conjure up another one.
No, awesome. Thank you so much. I know you speak to some very important people, so I appreciate you. I appreciate you reaching out to me, and for reading the book as well. And yeah, as I was saying to you before the call, keep writing your stuff. I love it.
Yeah, thank you. So Well, you are some of the important people I speak to, so so I'm always grateful.
No, thanks, man.